He said, well, I'll give you a little bit of a background. He said, when I was 2 years old, he said, my father died. And my mother was left there at home on the farm with 12 children to raise. I was the youngest of those 12 children. And he said, I'll never forget a situation that happened when I was 5 years old. Every morning about 5 o'clock, Mother would come in there to the room where I was asleep, and she'd put her hand on my shoulder, and she'd say, son, get up. We're going to have a good time today. And I'd bounce up out of that little bunk. I'd go running in there to the kitchen. I'd sit down on a little three-legged milk stool by the wood cook stove where Mama was fixing breakfast. She'd throw a quilt around my shoulders, pour me about a half a cup of coffee, about half milk. I'd sit there and sip that coffee while Mama was fixing breakfast. The other children would be out doing the chores, milking the cows, feeding the hogs, doing things that need to be done. They'd all come in. We'd all have breakfast together, and they'd take on off to school. But because I was too young to go to school, I'd stay there and help Mama do the work that needed to be done there at home on the farm. Well, this particular time I'm thinking about, we were picking turnip greens. Now, I don't know if you ever picked turnip greens before or not, but that's along in the winter time of the year when it's real cold. And we've been down there in the field, and we picked several baskets of those turnip greens. We brought them back up out of the house, and out there behind the house we had this big old long wooden bench. Had 3 big old wash tubs filled with water where we'd wash those turnip greens. Well, I went out there that morning to wash those turnip greens, and there was a layer of ice frozen over the top of each one of those tubs. I got me an old axe handle, and I went along there, and I broke the ice on top of each tub. I'd get me a big old double handful of those turnip greens, and I'd dunk them down there in that first tub and wash them around, and over in that second tub and rinse them, and then over in that third tub. That old Mississippi soil was hard to get off them turnip greens. I'd pile them over on the porch, and Mama would tie them into bundles, and we'd put them into cardboard boxes and take them down to the general store and swap them for sugar and flour and stuff we didn't raise there at home on the farm. Well, this particular morning I'm thinking about, I was washing those turnip greens, and I looked down at my hands, and it just seemed like a 5-year-old's hands are just so small, and my fingers were just so cold they'd turned numb. And my arms ached and my shoulders hurt, and I was just miserably cold from the tip of my toes to the top of my head. And I turned to my mother and I said, Mama, I'm not having a good time today. And I just hurt all over. And that night, when I went to bed, I was still aching and cold and miserable. Next morning, 5 o'clock, just like she always did, she come running in there. She put her hand on my shoulder and she said, son, get up. We're going to have a good time today. I just rolled over and I pulled that quilt over me and I said, no, I'm not going to get up. It's going to be a bad day. Well, she just turned around, went on back into the kitchen, started fixing breakfast. The other children came in doing the chores and had breakfast, went on off to school, and Mother went on out to work. About 10 o'clock, I heard her in there in the kitchen. I got up and came walking in. She looked at me and she said, what are you doing in here? I said, well, I got up to have some breakfast and help you do the work around here. She said, oh, no. No, son, she said, don't you remember? You made the decision this morning it was going to be a bad day. And she said, son, it's going to be a bad day all day long. And she took me right back in there and put me right back in that bed. Now, you'd think any mother would let her little boy up to have lunch. But bless that dear mother's disciplined heart of mine, I stayed right there in that bed right through lunch. I didn't even get to get up whenever the other children came home from school. I didn't even get to get up for supper. I mean, it was the longest, most miserable, bad day I ever spent in my young life. Next morning...